The signature isn't even close to matching, I whispered, staring at the documents spread across my apartment floor. My grandfather's will, the real one, lay next to the forged version my stepsister Madeline had submitted to the probate court. 3 months had passed since Grandpa James died, leaving his entire art collection and investment portfolio to me. He'd raised me after my parents' death, teaching me everything about art authentication and investment. The collection was worth millions, but its real value was sentimental. Each piece held memories of hours spent with him, learning the subtle details that separated masterpieces from forgeries. But Madeline had other plans. The day after the funeral, she'd swept into the probate hearing with a different will, one that left everything to her. The signatures looked genuine at first glance, the paper aged appropriately, even the lawyer's notary stamp seemed correct. I knew it was fake. Grandpa would never change his will without telling me. But Madeline had planned everything perfectly. "I'm sorry, Miss Collins," the judge had said, "but this will is more recent, properly notarized, and clearly expresses your grandfather's final wishes. The estate passes to Madeline Turner." I stood in the courthouse parking lot that day, watching Madeline climb into her Mercedes. She rolled down the window, her perfect smile gleaming with victory. "Enjoy being poor, Sophie," she called out. "Maybe you can get a job as a gallery security guard, to stay close to the art you'll never own." That was 3 months ago. Now, living in my small apartment after being evicted from Grandpa's house, I was finally putting the pieces together. The forged will was good, professional grade, but it wasn't perfect. 15 years of studying art authentication with Grandpa had taught me how to spot even the tiniest flaws in forgeries. My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend Lily. "Turn on channel 7 now." I flicked on the TV just in time to see Madeline standing at a podium, her arm wrapped around a tall, distinguished-looking man. "We are thrilled to announce the engagement of James Harrison II, CEO of Harrison Global Investments, to Madeline Turner, heiress to the prestigious Collins art collection," the reporter announced. I nearly dropped my coffee. James Harrison II wasn't just any wealthy CEO. He was one of the world's foremost art collectors and authentication experts. His private collection was legendary, and his reputation for spotting forgeries was unmatched. The couple met at a charity auction, the reporter continued, where Ms. Turner was showcasing pieces from her recently inherited collection. They planned to combine their collections after the wedding, creating one of the largest private art holdings in the country. The camera zoomed in on Madeline, resplendent in designer clothes bought with my grandfather's money. "James and I share a passion for authentic art," she simpered. "He's been absolutely fascinated by some of the rare pieces in my collection." "I bet he has," I thought, remembering the hundreds of hours Grandpa and I spent documenting every detail of each piece, including some very specific flaws that only a true expert would recognize. My phone buzzed again. "Lily, isn't Harrison the guy who exposed that huge art forgery ring last year?" I smiled for the first time in months. Madeline might have fooled a probate judge with her forged will, but she was about to show her fake collection to someone who would spot the inconsistencies immediately. See, there was something about the Collins art collection that only Grandpa and I knew. Something that would be obvious to an expert like James Harrison, but completely invisible to someone like Madeline who only saw dollar signs. 3 pieces in the collection were extremely convincing forgeries, purchased by my grandfather specifically to teach me the art of authentication. He kept detailed documentation of their true nature, including purchase records and correspondence with the forgers, all stored in a hidden safe that Madeline knew nothing about. I had discovered the safe's existence 2 days before Grandpa died. He left me a letter with the combination, telling me to use the contents when the time is right. I'd been too grief-stricken to open it before the probate hearing, but now, I pulled out my laptop and started typing an email to James Harrison's personal address, which, thankfully, Grandpa had in his contacts list. "Dear Mr. Harrison, congratulations on your engagement. As the rightful heir to the Collins art collection, I believe there are some details about certain pieces that might interest you, particularly the Vermeer study, the early Monet, and the recently discovered Degas." I attached scanned copies of the real will, the forged version, and several close-up photographs highlighting the forgery's flaws. "I look forward to discussing this matter with you, preferably before you combine your collection with one that contains several extremely well-documented forgeries. Best regards, Sophie Collins." My finger hovered over the send button. Was I really ready to expose everything, to potentially ruin Madeleine's perfect new life? I thought about Grandpa's last words to me. The truth about art, Sophie, is that authenticity always reveals itself to those who know how to look. I hit send. 2 days later, I received a reply. Ms. Collins, I believe we need to talk. Would you be available for lunch tomorrow? There are some interesting discrepancies in your stepsister's collection that I'd very much like to discuss. Regards, James Harrison I. I looked around my small apartment at the art books and authentication guides scattered everywhere, at the documents proving Madeleine's deception. Soon, a real expert would see exactly what she'd done, not just with the will, but with the precious collection she'd stolen. Madeleine had taught me that some people will do anything for money, but Grandpa had taught me something more valuable, that true authenticity, whether in art or in life, eventually comes to light. As I replied accepting the lunch invitation, I smiled thinking about Madeleine's words in the courthouse parking lot. Maybe she should have spent less time gloating and more time learning about the collection she'd stolen. Because sometimes karma doesn't just happen, sometimes it needs an expert's eye to reveal the truth. The restaurant James Harrison chose for our meeting was exactly what you'd expect from a billionaire art collector. Elegant, private, and discreet. I felt out of place in my simple dress, but I carried something more valuable than designer clothes. Grandpa's documentation about the forged artworks. Harrison was already seated when I arrived, studying photographs of the collection spread across the table. He stood as I approached, his expression unreadable. Miss Collins, he extended his hand. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Though I must admit, I was already concerned about certain pieces in your stepsister's collection. I sat down, placing my folder on the table. You noticed the inconsistencies in the vermeer. His eyebrows rose slightly. The brushwork on the bottom left corner. Yes, most people wouldn't catch that. My grandfather taught me well, I said, opening the folder. He bought that piece specifically because it was such a masterful forgery. He used it to teach me about authentication. I pulled out the original purchase documentation, along with Grandpa's detailed notes about the forgery's creation. Harrison's eyes widened as he read. This is extraordinary, he murmured. James Collins was a legend in authentication circles, but I had no idea he was documenting forgeries this way. There's more, I said, revealing the rest of the papers. The Monet and the Degas. They're also forgeries, exceptional ones, but fake nonetheless. My grandfather kept every detail about their origins. Harrison leaned back, running a hand through his silver hair. Miss Collins, do you understand what this means? Your stepsister has been presenting these pieces as authentic. She's already accepted offers from major museums for viewing rights. I know. I met his eyes steadily, just like she presented a forged will to steal my inheritance. I showed him the 2 versions of the will, pointing out the subtle discrepancies that proved the newer one was fake. His frown deepened as he examined them. The probate judge missed this? He asked, pointing to a tiny flaw in the signature. Madeleine hired professionals. They're good, just not good enough for someone who knows what to look for. At that moment, the restaurant's door burst open. Madeleine stormed in, her face flushed with anger. What are you doing here? She demanded, glaring at me. James, darling, why are you meeting with her? Harrison stood slowly. We were discussing the Collins collection, particularly some interesting details about its authenticity. Madeleine's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. Authenticity. Everything in that collection is genuine. Sophie's just jealous because Grandpa James left it all to me. Did he? Harrison picked up the forged will. Like this document is genuine? Of course it is, Madeleine snapped. The court approved it. Just like the Vermeer study is genuine? I asked quietly. The one Grandpa bought from Marcus White in 2008 specifically because it was such a well-crafted fake. Madeleine's composure cracked. You're lying. Actually, Harrison interjected, she's not. I've suspected those pieces were forgeries since I first saw them. I just couldn't understand why James Collins would have forgeries in his collection. He gestured to the documentation. Now I know, they were teaching tools, and quite valuable ones for authentication study. He turned to Madeleine, his voice cold. You've been presenting known forgeries as authentic pieces. That's art fraud, Madeleine. A federal offense. You don't understand, she pleaded, reaching for his arm. Sophie's manipulating you. She's always been jealous of me. The only manipulation here, Harrison replied, is the forge will you use to steal her inheritance. He pulled out his phone. I've already contacted the FBI's art crime division. They're very interested in both the fraudulent art sales and the probate fraud. Madeline's face turned ashen. You can't, we're engaged. We're engaged, Harrison corrected. I don't marry art fraudsters. Security appeared at Madeline's elbows. Harrison's personal team, I realized. As they escorted her out, she turned to me one last time. You've ruined everything, she shrieked. This is all your fault. No, I said calmly. This is karma. Grandpa always said authenticity reveals itself to those who know how to look. After she was gone, Harrison turned to me. The FBI will want to speak with you about the documentation. The probate court will also need to be notified about the forged will. I nodded, gathering the papers. I know, I'm ready. One more thing, he added. The authentication techniques your grandfather developed, documented in these notes. They're revolutionary. Have you considered turning them into a formal authentication program? I blinked. I thought about it, but starting something like that requires resources. Resources like a fully funded authentication institute. Harrison smiled. I've been looking to establish one for years. We should discuss a partnership. 3 months later, I stood in the newly restored Collins Gallery, watching as workers rehung the collection in its rightful place. The probate court had quickly reversed its decision once presented with evidence of Madeline's forgery. She and her accomplices were facing federal charges for both the fraudulent will and the attempted art fraud. The Collins Harrison Authentication Institute occupied the building's top floor, where I now taught others the techniques Grandpa had passed down to me. Harrison had proven to be a generous partner, expanding our program to include international research and authentication projects. My phone buzzed, a message from the prison where Madeline awaited trial. I want to talk. Please. I deleted it without responding. She'd had plenty to say in the courthouse parking lot that day. Now she could enjoy being poor. A fresh-faced student poked her head into my office. Ms. Collins, we're ready to begin the forgery analysis workshop. I smiled, picking up Grandpa's old authentication guide. Coming. Today we're going to learn about a very special Vermeer study. The Institute's motto, inscribed above our entrance, read, "Truth in art, like truth in life, cannot remain hidden forever." Below it in smaller letters, we added Grandpa's favorite saying, "Authenticity always reveals itself to those who know how to look." Madeline had taught me that some people will do anything for money, but Grandpa had taught me something far more valuable, that true expertise, patience, and integrity eventually triumph over deception. And sometimes, if you're lucky, karma arrives in the form of a billionaire art collector who knows exactly what to look for.